And even though the Constable of France, Charles d'Albert, who was the guy commanding the French advance guard that blocked Henry at the Somme, was in command also with um, the uh, Marshal Jean II Le Mangret, also Boucicaut. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. These guys had nominal command of the army, but with such high level nobility amongst them, the egos of those guys are not going to let these men of relatively humble birth boss them around.
Maybe you should just mention one thing to the audience, because I know this about this point in history that particularly with France, like the idea of the military, the strength of the military is the noble knight. It's the nobility class. Whereas the English are coming into this with the longbowmen, it's like it's almost as if
It's
in many ways the commoners attacking, the nobles in some ways.
in a way you could talk about a lot more other battles, like the Battle of the Golden Spurs as an example.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is also there. And it's kind of sad that these guys keep interfering with the command because the Constable of France, Charles d'Albert, had a pretty sound strategy. He did not want to engage. More reinforcements were coming to the French camp. They are blocking the only route that Henry can take to Calais, which is that he has nowhere else to go.
Yeah, they've already won this victory. If they would just stand their ground and wait, they would have taken them.
And they already know that the English are low on supplies.
Hmm.
The campaigning season's almost over, and they are being ravaged by illness for months.
Oh yeah.
These guys, you're almost in a checkmate if you want to say.
Yeah, yeah.
But the noble, and keep in mind, I should also add this: the Constable of France is, legally speaking, the highest ranked military man in the country. So he should be the one calling the orders, but
There's
it doesn't really work.
there's a bit of a
They,
similar element at play here, kind of like the Roman Republic, where if you're a
I was
noble,
actually,
yeah,
I was actually going to compare that to it, but in a different way. So as Constable did want to not engage, since he knew that where the strengths were, that they are only going to get stronger in military sense. The English are only going to get weaker. It rubbed shoulders with all these dukes and counts and whatnot as cowardly and disgraceful. Kind of like how the Romans before Canny looked at the Fabian strategy.
exactly, yeah.
That's why I wanted to really get that reference out. And but they were at least smart enough to know by this time that you should not charge up to a position of English archers that are prepared. It took them a few decisive defeats to realize that value and lesson. And anyways, for the first few hours of the day of battle of 25th October, nothing really happens. There's no movement, nothing happening, and Henry now realizes that he has to play his hand. He's forced, right? He's more restricted in terms of option. He orders the English line to move forward to the French when he realizes after a couple of hours that these guys are not even going to move forward. So all the longbowmen and men-at-arms, they pick up the stakes and they move forward. They advance down the line. And just in longbowman range, mind you, these longbows could shoot a couple of 100 meters, these guys. The penetrative power with plate armor and such would only be at maybe 50, 60 meters. Still pretty powerful weapon. So at around 200 meters, they stop their advance when they're 200 meters from the French lines, plant their stakes, and unleash a volley. This mostly impacts the cavalry, the horsemen, the mounted horsemen that you see. And their horses get spooked, so these guys, in a rash challenge, decide to rush forward and, engage. But the ground is like, in a very marshy and quagmirish state. the horses are not able to move too fast. And Thomas Erpingham, who is commanding the longbowmen, he actually orders the men to keep an arrow drawn full but hold. And when they come, when the knights are very close, that time he unleashes a full power volley on these guys. And that volley destroyed the mounted French knights. And this is just kind of like an enactment of, like, what would be mounted knights charging. I have to say that would be the most ferocious thing you could see on the battlefield in the Middle Ages. But here, their advantage has been completely nullified. And the few there are most of them are killed. Some manage to reach the English line, but by then the stakes play their role, in which the horses are stopped by it, and the English men-at-arms rush forward, make quick work of them, and soon the remainder of the knights are in a headlong retreat.
One thing to mention, though, just for the audience to visualize, these are heavily armed knights coming into a muddy battlefield, so they can't move almost at all. While
Yeah,
the while the lightly armored English could just come up and dagger them, basically in the neck.
true enough, but they don't do that just yet. This is just for this is the first wave, so this
Yeah,
is just
the
like
first wave.
1,500 of the French army. Now, the first and second lines start their advance, but Craig, as you mentioned, it's such a marshy and really bad terrain that these knights are loaded with, even on foot, because the lines, as you see here, under the constable and Alisson, while they're like nobility or well-funded warriors, or the nobility and their retinues, so these guys are in full plate or chainmail. And on a normal day, they pack a punch. This movement through the field, which is in a horrible state, is just taxing. They're trying to move, but with 50, 60 pounds, the charge of 1,500 horses, and now the few retreating men, it disorganizes them and they are sapped of a lot of momentum. The English longbows open a devastating volley series, which no doubt causes casualties. But quite a few of them do survive because they still have the numbers advantage. And unlike what we see in movies, armor actually works pretty well.
Especially against
Especially,
bows.
yeah, and especially even more so with plate armor, which was
Mhm.
at least a good chunk of the knights by this time in Europe could actually afford a full set of plate armor. They crash into the English battles, and for a brief moment, the English line actually reels backwards, but their men-at-arms quickly stabilize and engage in an all-out brawl. It's not a fight anymore, it's a brawl. And at the same time, the second and third lines are like the second line mostly of the rest of the nobility are marching down. And they soon start pushing into the backs of the front line. Now, while it gives some forward momentum strength, in this kind of ground, it's just made any movement between the French impossible. The tired men at the front cannot easily retreat. The men behind cannot move forward. And for the English longbowmen at the flanks and in the forests, you've just presented them a nice, juicy target. The longbowmen rain chaos. Many hundreds of Frenchmen died to the arrows. But in the front lines, where the English men-at-arms and the French men-at-arms, it's a pretty brutal slog, with the Duke of York himself being killed in combat. It was said that in his side of the battle was the most ferocious of the melee fighting. And King Henry himself also fought and nearly died, with some French knight getting a part of his crown in battle. But ultimately, the French lose their nerve and retreat. And this is after when the English longbowmen on the sides had finished firing all their volleys. They're out of arrows that they just draw their knives or whatever and have, started to come from the flanks and, really adding more misery to the French, to say the least. The French start their withdrawal to their camp, and they've lost 7,000 men dead. And the English take a few thousand prisoners as well. And this is including the Dukes of Alençon, Bourbon, and the Marshal Boussiot. Okay, these guys are captured. The Constable of France is killed in battle. Now, as they are mulling what to do, an Englishman shouts that he sees French reinforcements and comes the direction of the English. And so Henry believes that they are, like French reinforcements that have actually arrived, even though it was just a small French Burgundian raiding force, just English camp. So he feels like, with the still a large part, the army that retreated, that he just faced, still outnumbers him. He has a few thousand prisoners with him. And now with the possibility of reinforcements, it's not a good situation he's in. And he orders 200 longbow to butcher most of the French prisoners in cold blood. They are killed, which just adds to the insane death toll of 6,000 men that the French already suffered. The English casualties were remarkably light. Some sources go as low as 100 English killed. This is including the longbowmen, to as high as only 600. That was the Battle of Agincourt, and the butchery of their comrades really, shook the morale of the French, and they made a complete withdrawal from the area. Now, one thing before I get into the march to Calais, where were the ranged units of the French? Why didn't they fight? They had about 7,000 of these men. The rain before the battle on the night of 24th October ensured their non-participation. Since the English used the longbows, they could unstring their bows and keep their strings in special pouches, which kept them dried throughout the rain shower. This ensured that on the day of the battle, that the strings are completely unmolested by the weather, and this has not compromised the drawing strength and thereby the penetrative power of these bows. The French, on the other hand, use crossbowmen. The crossbow, you cannot remove the string mechanism, and that pretty much ensured that their was already range to the British to be even used. So it was probably good for in terms of the body to put them at the area. But that's why they did not participate. So with this magnificent victory, Henry does much to Calais, but more importantly, that night the two dukes he captured, the Dukes of Alençon and Bourbon, they had to suffer the horrible treatment of waiting on the king at his dinner that night.
Oh boy.
You can imagine that pretty much went down pretty well with them.